Thursday, January 20th, 2011. Dinner and Learn, God of Our Understanding, Part 9. And today it's also Tu B'Shvat. So Tu B'Shvat Sameach to everyone.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Judaism and Recovery. We're studying from the book God of Our Understanding by Rabbi Shais Taub. The book is about Jewish spirituality and recovery from addiction. And today we're starting part 3. And we discussed in previous parts, in part 1 we talked about the problem, and in part 2 we talked about the solution. And last week we read the steps, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which were later adopted and adapted by other 12-step fellowships and anonymous groups. And we read them from different perspectives of people who experienced them, because although the steps are written, we talked about how really it's a sheet of notes that each one sings with their own little interpretation, and each one of us experiences the steps that we take in a different way, so people share it in different ways. In this third part of the book, we're going to talk about the theological side of the 12 steps, which means that in the 12 steps, it talks about a belief in God. Now, all of us know that because the 12 steps say God as we understood Him, God as we understand Him, etc. But although it is common to hear people in AA meetings, in groups, in rooms, at tables, talk about just pick something and make it your higher power, we're going to find out in this chapter that making anything your higher power really requires certain qualities for this higher power, and those qualities will be looked at in depth in following chapters, one per chapter. But basically it's telling us that the 12-step program, AA, has an opinion about what God is and about what God is not. Alright, so let's read a little bit. We're at chapter 6, which is in your books on page 53. In spite of everything we've spoken of so far pointing to universal truths behind the spiritual principles of recovery, I am sure that for many readers the nagging question remains, okay, sure, the 12 steps aren't officially Christian, but are they really compatible with my beliefs as a Jew? At least that's how I've heard this question posed to me hundreds of times. My first answer is that I cannot tell anyone whether the steps can be reconciled with their personal beliefs. When people say, someone came to me one time, he says, you need to talk to my sister. I said, why? She says, because she found out she's pregnant and she won't do an abortion. I want you to convince her to do an abortion. Jewish people believe in abortion, right?
No.
So, in her mind, Christians don't believe in abortion. Jews must believe in abortion then, because we're just the opposite of everything. And then it occurred to her that maybe Jewish people also are against abortion. And you know what? It's complicated. So we're not going to go there. But we're just going to say that what people believe, Rabbi, is it true that if I have a tattoo I can be buried in a Jewish cemetery? That's a Jewish belief. Is that really what Judaism says? And is that really what the Torah says? Go argue. Some people point out to different places. It's complicated. So basically, our question is not, what do Jewish people believe, and is it compatible with the 12 steps? Is, what is the Jewish official belief. What does the Torah say about a God? What does the Torah say about our God? And is that something that's compatible? Well, we're going to talk about how is it compatible with what it says in the 12 steps about what a God is. The next question, which we have in the second part of the page, is how Jewish are the steps? There's an easy way to avoid answering this question altogether. That is just to say that since the steps espouse no particular theological beliefs, and it says specifically that we're not affiliated with any religion, and we have no opinion about religion, etc., they are as such compatible with all spiritual paths. It's like, does black go with pink? Does black go with gray? Does black go with white? You know what? Black pretty much goes with every color. It's black. So does white. So let's just, because it's devoid of any religion, it must be compatible with all religions. The Rabbi says he doesn't like that answer. I don't think that it's completely accurate or completely honest. The steps, although replete with the qualifier God of our understanding, do make, or at least imply, some definite theological assertion. The steps are not black. The steps are not white. The steps have their own specific colors and hues. Hues. It's impossible to talk that much about God without having at least some unspoken presuppositions about who exactly this God is. Presupposition. So in other words, we have to find, no, it does not match with every color. Because it's a defined color, then there will be colors that are mismatched with this specific color. And therefore, just because the 12 steps are not affiliated with any religion does not automatically make it compatible with every religion. Certain will find 4 specific things that we believe the 12 steps say about God, and that not all religions accept. The answer I usually give, the author says, is not only that there's nothing in the 12 steps that's problematic from a Jewish perspective, but also that the steps can actually help Jews to better understand their own God, which means not only are the 12 steps in the color that matches the color of Judaism, they're actually colors that reinforce the color of Judaism. When you wear this pink with that purple, the purple sticks out a little better. Okay? The steps in their clear and simple language marvelously communicate certain truths in which we as Jews are already enjoined to believe, but we don't always understand how to believe them, or we don't always know that we need to believe them. Accordingly, as expressed in the title of this book, the Jew in recovery is often delighted to find that the God of our understanding, which is the God in AA, turns out to be the very same as the God of our Father, the Jewish God. So I skipped this little thing. So at last, whether the steps more closely represent one belief system or another is irrelevant. I have no stake in calling the step Jewish, even if they strike me as being such. What I do feel is important, however, is to explain my understanding of the steps, so says the author, in a way that could potentially help Jews feel comfortable, knowing that their recovery through the 12 steps does not compromise their Jewishness in any way. This, in many ways, is actually the whole point of this book, to help Jewish addicts find recovery through the steps. So we're not here to replace the steps. We're not here because we found a better way or a special way for special people. We're just trying to figure out a way to help Jewish people follow the 12 steps of AA, not the 12 steps of Judaism. Now, some people say this is unnecessary. The 12 steps are here to save an addict from dying. And the same way that when you go to the ER, you don't specifically look for the Jewish way of treating a heart attack, although we do ask for a Jewish doctor. We're here to save a life. There's no Jewish way of treating a heart attack. There's just the medical way of treating a heart attack. Who cares? If you don't want to cross in your bedroom, don't go to Providence. But besides that, who cares? You go to a doctor and you get treated. So you go to 12 steps and you get treated. Who cares? And here's the answer that the author says here. It is a little distinction over here. Because we have already identified in the previous section about the solution that the way AA treats addiction is through not a moral program, not a mental program, not a physical program, but a spiritual program. Now, spiritual is the art of the soul. And when we talk about the soul, and when we talk about spirituality, then yes, there is definitely different approaches of how to delve into the art of the soul. And if there's a particular way for a particular congregation of souls, the Jewish souls, then we need to look into finding the way to experience this method of treatment in a way, if possible, that is compatible with our own faith and our tradition. We'll go to page 55. At the risk of making a sweeping generalization, allow me to say that addicts are always looking for an excuse not to recover. It is a very appropriate generalization. Because unless we are pushed to the bottom of the barrel, if we have any way out, we will definitely try the other way out first. And one of the way outs, every addict, irrespective of his or her drug of choice, possesses a certain nagging sense of what we call terminal uniqueness. Eventually the addict will always claim, but my case is different. I'm not so much that addicts, it's not so much that addicts are too proud to buy into anything too mainstream, although there is certainly a factor. Rather, addicts typically feel so unusual, rightfully so. So special, rightfully so, that they have difficulty believing that anything normal, popular, or universal could be of any help to them. And I had a person who told me that AA works very good. You know why AA works very good for everybody else? Because they did not go through what I went through. If anybody would go through what I went through, the steps wouldn't work for them either. Nothing against AA. There's not one person in AA that had it as bad as me. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. All due respect.
Was this the person who wanted you to help you get the abortion?
This presents a special dilemma. The premise of 12 Steps Recovery is that living according to basic spiritual principles brings a reprieve from active addiction. Spirituality, as we have discussed previously, is the solution. But if the 12 steps were recognizably aligned with to any known ideology or set of beliefs, addicts would find an easy excuse for feeling driven away from the program. Thus we see that while 12-step groups are, as a rule, staunchly committed to spiritual principles, they're equally as renowned for their flexibility on all matters pertaining to the particular beliefs of their members. Indeed, one criticism leveled at 12-step fellowships by religiously inclined individuals, both from within and outside of the program, is the perceived ambiguity as to what beliefs are actually set forth by the spiritual tenets of recovery. So, something was sneaked in to the book of Alcoholics Anonymous in a way that is not recognizable at first sight. There's actually a lot of God in the 12 steps. There's tons, almost I will say, of religion in there. Non-specific religion, but nevertheless, a lot. From the naked eye, it seems like it's a very uncommitting when it comes to God. Higher power, as we understood it, of our understanding, the doorknob, the group, your sponsor. Really, that's not the truth. So, I don't want to be the one to break the news. I'm sure you guys read the book already. It is indeed very religious at its core. Because religion basically says that we believe in a God that does specific things, a God that wants specific things, etc., etc. Spiritual might have the connotation of let's hold hands and sing and smell the beautiful perfume, etc. And religion has this type of rigidity to it, where this is black and this is white. And we don't want to have anything to do with stuff that's black and white. Oh no. That means allowing for authority, or allowing for someone to control me. God forbid. Let's go down. For the reason we have just discussed, it is understandable that AA and the 12-step groups that came after it have held a staunchly non-sectarian position on matter of belief. At the same time, however, it would be dishonest to claim that the steps are devoid of any theology. While there's nothing in the 12 steps, like a list of theological principles where tenets of faith are enumerated, we believe this, we believe this, we believe that, a thoughtful reading of the steps will lead one to conclude that they are indeed based on and espouse a distinct theological position. In other words, subtlety should not be confused with neutrality. Subtlety should not be confused with neutrality. There's a consistent theology to the 12 steps, and to pretend otherwise would be to ignore the very power with a capital P upon which they draw to facilitate the recovery of the addict. Could you imagine if that power that is going to save me actually is a non-defined, nondescript type of little thing that may or may not exist or may or not want? And that's the power that's going to save me? Of course, the question that now arises, as we have noted, how is this theology compatible with Judaism. So now that we have established that there is a theology to the 12 steps, that there is a definite view and principle of what God is and what God is not, then as Jewish people we want to know if it's okay or not. You know, there's the atheist who doesn't want to send his son to a Jewish school because then they're going to teach him about all that stuff. The Torah, Moses, the splitting of the Red Sea, God created the world. But the best prep school in his neighborhood happened to be a Catholic school. So he figured, hey, we'll send a kid to Catholic school. Well, one day, right around Easter, his son comes home, he says, Dad, what's the Trinity? He says, the Trinity? What are you talking about? He says, the Trinity. The God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. His father looks at him and he says, Son, there's only one God, and we don't believe in it. So, what's with this God over here? Is the one that we believe in or the one we don't believe in? The God of AA. Which one is it? Because we're Jewish. We need to find out about these things. You can't just go blindly and pick a God that someone else picked. We got to figure out for ourselves. Do we believe in him or we don't? Is it from the good guys or the bad guys? Well, let's find out first what this God is, and then we'll find out if he's from the good guys or the bad guys. How many steps mention the Word of God? 4 of the steps. Step 3, Step 5, Step 6, and Step 11. For those of you who are not familiar with the steps, it'll be on page 45 of your book, and you can look how the word God is mentioned in 3, 5, 6, and 11. And 2 more of them refer to God indirectly, either as power greater than ourselves in Step 2, or by the pronoun Him in Step 7. So here we have 6 steps that talk about God. And that's 5 more steps that talk about alcohol in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Actually, if you do a search, blah, 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 it tells us that the use of the word God 4 times through the steps, a word that contains only about 200 words, constitutes an ubiquitous usage. Indeed, excluding any pronouns, prepositions, definite and indefinite articles, God is the most repeated word in the steps. Okay. Because it's 4 times and there's no other word that's repeated 4 times. As such, it is difficult to imagine that the steps do not offer some notion of who or what this God is. Talk so much about it, it must tell us something. Moreover, although as mentioned earlier, it often serves a convenient purpose to act as if the problem takes no distinct theological position, to persist in this assertion is simply to discount the facts. Okay, the steps don't just refer to God, they also tell us about Him. First, the first thing that they tell us, which is in step 2, the first time God is mentioned, what does it tell us? That He is a power. Came to believe that a power with a capital P greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. So first of all, God is a power. Not only that is that this power is greater than ourselves. So we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. So we have 2 definitions for God right there. God is not an idea or an abstraction. He is a force and He is active. And this force is more powerful than we are. Further, we are told that this power can actually do something for us, something quite big. It can restore us to our sanity. These are all theological statements, and these are all contained just in step 2. In other words, right away in the second step, we have already told quite a lot about God. Not just that He exists, but also about how He manifests Himself in our life. God is active in our life, God is more powerful than I am, and God can do stuff for me. Number 2, the next step, step 3, in which we are told to turn our will, our lives to His care, tells us even more about God. He cares. That's another distinct theological position. One can believe in God and not believe that He cares. But this step tells us, at least implicitly, that He does indeed care. And by the way, even within Jewish theology, there's arguments about the extent of God's care. Does He care about all of the universe, or just about humans? Does He care about humans as a general population, or does He care individually for each human being? Does He care individually for each human being in the generality of their lives, or in the details of their lives? But when we talk about a God that cares, a God that will restore me, an individual person, to sanity, I am taking a theological position that God not only exists, not only has the power to make a hurricane or a tsunami or an earthquake, but also God has the power to influence the individual path of a human being. The individual, every single person has a God that cares for them and that will eventually be able to restore us to sanity. That's pretty detailed. That's not just a hurricane. That's just like, hey God, this is my God. In step 5, we're told that we can talk to Him. Admit it to God. You admit to God. How do you admit to God? Do you talk to the knob? So obviously there is a God that we can talk to. That means that He listens. And actually, there's a distinction about what I say. If I say, I love you, or I say, I hate you. If I say to God that I admit my wrongs, or that I don't take responsibility. Try that with a knob. We can speak to Him openly and honestly about ourselves. In step 6 and 7, we're told that God can change us. And that we can ask Him to do so. In step 11, we're told that we can consciously engage Him and that we can ask Him for knowledge of His will and the power to carry out this will. Oh, this is a big one, by the way. Big theological statement. God has a will. God wants something. He has a plan for this universe. And here again, we can talk about the same thing. Does God have the will for humanity, for the universe, for humans, for animals? Does He have a will for the generality of the humankind, or for specifically every individual? Does He have a will about where my path should go in general in my life? Or does He have a will for me every single day of how I should conduct myself, every single hour, every single action, every single thought, every single word that I say? Well, if I pray every day to God, in step 11, I ask for His will for me and the power to carry that out, then I have a certain belief about the fact that God has a will for me today. That's a theological statement. This incidentally also sets forth another very big idea. God has a will. That's a strong theological statement. And not only does He have a will, but He has a will for us, things He specifically desires. That's another word here, because will and desire is not the same thing. He desires from the individual. God wants us to do things, and He desires for us to do things. I want to take a nap. I desire to take a nap in a very comfy bed with a thick blanket and a down pillow. That's more of a desire. A desire implicates some type of pleasure that comes when that desire is fulfilled. A will could be something that doesn't impact me personally if you do it or not. If you go to work for the Ford Motor Company and you are on the assembly line, you have to follow protocol. There's no human being who's going to take it personally if you follow or you don't follow the protocol. Well, you might get fired because the car is going to be broken. But there's no single person in Ford Motor Company who is going to get pleasure from the fact that you followed all the rules. God does take pleasure when we follow His will. He has a desire. Hence, far from existing in a theological vacuum, the steps actually convey several key ideas about God. These are not to be taken for granted. They are by no means universal to all system of beliefs. Not all theologies hold these views, but the program does. 4 things. He is a power. Number 2, He can affect our lives. Number 3, He is caring. Number 4, He has a will. So these are the 4 next chapters. We're going to talk about the power of God, the way God has an effect on our lives, the way God is caring, and the way God has a will. And we will see that these 4 principles that define the God of the program, as expressed to us in the 12 steps, and if someone has a different way of reading those 12 steps, by all means, but the way this author reads the 12 steps, these 4 truths are put forth. We're going to explore how each one of these truths are reflected in the Jewish faith and in the literature that came to us from the Torah and its sages.